So today I am going to do something a little bit different that I've never really done before on this channel. Please leave me a comment at the end, letting me know how you liked it, if you want to see more of these, or if you'd prefer to see more of the other things. So let's get into how I made the decision of where the null channel is going to host its container images.
3, 2, 1, 0.
The null channel.
I've been wanting to produce some things and make sure that it's available for all of you to go check out, to play with, to use. And part of that, part of what I needed was the ability to distribute these things. And one of the greatest things, the source code has always been available. Most of my source code is open source. Actually, all of it. I can't think of any non-open source code that I've written in a very long time. But just having the code isn't as nice as if it's already built and in a container for you, especially when, with our Kubeflow pipelines, all of my reusable pipelines can be shared. And if it's already in a container for you, you can go ahead and just use it in your pipeline without needing to build it yourself and to maintain all of that. So I have really wanted to do this. And so I started looking into it. Now, when I go to make a decision, I usually make the decision by making a couple sets of requirements. And I did nothing different. This time I did the exact same. So the first thing, I needed it to be free. And the reason is not because I'm a cheapskate. If I'm making money off of something, I love to pay and to support. And even if I'm not making money off of something, I still like to support the things that are helping me. That being said, I couldn't have a very high cost because really all I'm trying to do is distribute open source packages. So the next thing that I wanted was for it to be as close to the code as possible. The last thing is simple to set up and maintain. There's this thing called technical debt. And if I was to make a really difficult to set up and maintain solution, I would spend a lot of my time maintaining and not a lot of my time making these videos. The very last thing that I wanted was easy to use for others. So I wanted you guys to be able to consume these packages as easily as possible. So these were my requirements for my package repository. All right, so I looked at GitHub, GitLab, GCP, Docker, Quay, and CodeFresh were the container repositories that I looked into. Now, in doing this, I originally started out with GitHub, and the reason is close to code. That is as close to the code as possible. And let me show you some of the ways that it can be really, really nice. So if we go over to this project should be released soon. One thing that you notice right here is when you release the image on GitHub, the packages are right here. So this is the image of the latest, and you can go and find the Docker pull command right here. This is as close to the code as I could find. And I really wanted this to be the end-all be-all. So let's go through the checklist. It's as close as you're going to get to the code. If you go view the repository, it is right on the right-hand side, right there. It is simple and easy to maintain. The only thing I did to do this was this YAML file right here and this right here. That's all I had to do. It's also free to use with open source repositories. And it's pretty simple to maintain. I did not have to do a lot. I didn't even have to set up anything for the GitHub actor or the GitHub token. That was all handled and managed by GitHub for me. So the very last thing that I have is easy to use for others. And it gets one big plus and one big minus in this category. So if we go here, it is easy to use because you can click this link right here and you can go ahead and copy that and you're ready to go. So let's open up a terminal. So this is just going to pull the image and watch what happens. No basic auth credentials. So the biggest downfall is this is a public open GitHub. And the biggest problem that I have is this right here. Now, if we take this and go search for it. All right, so if you look for this error online, you're actually going to find quite a few people who have brought up the same thing since September, I think 7th, September, it doesn't say, September of last year. So this is actually an ongoing thing. There is no authless use of the image, which at first doesn't sound like a big deal because, you can use the Docker CLI to give it authentication and do it through that. But it becomes a more difficult problem when then you're needing to encode these credentials into your CI or into your Kubernetes cluster that's going to also consume this image. And this is where it gets a negative for usability, is it's just not that usable for an open source repository. Now, don't get me wrong, using credentials and stuff to log in is a good thing, and I'm not harping on that exactly. My biggest thing is that I wanted these to be available very easily for people who wanted to test them out, play around with them, and whatnot. So because of this, my solution isn't to just use GitHub. And this is actually why this entire search started, because if this hadn't been a thing, I probably would have just stopped at GitHub and not really searched anymore, because it fits all of the other checkboxes that I had. So the next thing I checked was GCP, and GCP looked like it had a really nice offering, and GCP and AWS and Azure all have similar offerings. I didn't look into them, into the AWS and Azure ones as much, but they looked very, very similar. The problem with all of them that I saw was that, especially GCP, would charge for egress traffic. So they not only charge for the storage to store the image, which isn't bad, and I wouldn't mind paying that at all, but they also charge for egress traffic, which means that, when my channel blows up and everyone starts downloading my images, it could get expensive kind of quickly, and I didn't want that unknown variable. Other than that, it's easy to use. It doesn't live close to my code, which is fine. It would be another service that I have to maintain. But it was relatively easy to use, would not have been too much extra work. And so it was pretty high up on my list of alternatives to use, with the one caveat is it could have an unknown cost if somebody abused downloading my images. The next one was Quay.io by Red Hat, and I liked the offering, to be honest. Now, the only problem I had was it was going to be $15 a month. This is not a deal breaker, and I might end up using it at some point anyways. I like supporting good open source projects, but in the end, $15 a month was more than I would probably spend with GCP, unless if, really making some awesome containers, and definitely more than some of the other options available. Now, that being said, it's not as close as GitHub as far as close to the code, but nobody else was going to be as close to the code. Integration seemed easy, seemed like there was very little technical debt there, and it looked well supported. That brings me to a host of self-hosted. I decided not to go with self-hosted because I didn't want that technical debt, that part of, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time maintaining my own package registry. Now, we can do this and we can explore those options and what options are available. You basically have Harbor and Quay, but I didn't want to do that right now. right now I wanted to focus on making videos, making Kubeflow pipelines, and making some programming tutorials and help videos. And so with that in mind, that was kind of out of the boat. The next thing was GitLab. My biggest problem with GitLab was two things. GitLab, I don't host my code in GitLab. And to use their container registry, it seemed like it would work fine, but it seemed like it was easier to use if it was through their CI/CD pipelines. It didn't look like I had to use their CI/CD pipelines, but it looked like it would be much easier to use if that was the case. And it wasn't any closer to my code than any other option was. So that was pretty much the only downfall I saw. It was free for public repositories. It was simple to use if I was using the CI/CD pipelines, and it would be easy for other people to use as well. And if my code was there, it would be close to the code. I really think that they made a great product, just not necessarily the one for me right now. All right, so the last one that I tried was a place called CodeFresh. And let's pull up CodeFresh. CodeFresh was interesting. I had never looked at CodeFresh before. And this is their UI, and here is their image repository. Now, what I couldn't find out in this was how to just use their image repository. Everything that I found was using their pipelines to deploy stuff to their image repository. And so it wasn't necessarily easy to use. I'm not saying that it wasn't bad. I just didn't want to spend more than a half an hour trying out CodeFresh, and I didn't want to move my pipelines to CodeFresh because, again, I'm trying to keep everything as close to my code as possible. So that means using GitHub Actions, because if you go and want to check out how I build a project, you can. You can pull up the GitHub action, and it's all right there in the same project. So CodeFresh's biggest thing would have been that it would require me to maintain a pipeline somewhere further away from the code. And I felt like that was a bigger downfall than just hosting my packages somewhere else. That being said, I think it's a really interesting service. I didn't get to play around a ton with it, but I think that it's worth looking into if you want to build some sort of pipeline, especially if your pipeline isn't in a place that already has free pipelines like GitHub Actions or GitLab CI/CD. So if you have something that's outside those, this looks like it has a really great free tier and might be worth checking out. All right, so that brings me to the last one, Docker Hub. Docker Hub actually checks all the boxes. Free for public repositories. Simple to set up and maintain. It took 3 minutes. It also took 3 minutes to get my GitHub actions to deploy to Docker Hub. Let's check that out. So if you notice here in our workflows, this was publishing to GitHub Docker registry, and this is deploying to the Docker Hub Docker registry. And the only steps that I had to do manually was add secrets to my to this pipeline so that there was the Docker username and password that it could have to deploy. So that was a little marginal amount of work. Other than that, it's copying and pasting these lines right here. Super easy, super simple to set up. And this is the approach that I've decided to go with. I push to both. When GitHub fixes, I'm going to say fix because I consider it a bug. It might be a feature, but when they fix the ability to use the packages anonymously, I really, that's my go-to, would be the GitHub packages. It's close to the code as possible and fantastic. I'm going to continue maintaining that because if it's simple enough to log in and you're already done that, that's the one. But I'm also going to post to Docker Hub because it hits all the checkboxes except close to code. It allows me to maintain this free and deliver to you for free. it's easy for you guys to use. You don't even have to, when you pull from GitHub, if you notice, so if you notice when you pull from GitHub's one, you have to do all of this fun stuff here, whereas pulling from Docker would just be Docker pull. It would just be Docker pull null channel lights latest. So this is actually even slightly easier than the GitHub one because the URL is just slightly shorter and you've pulled the latest. So I hope that this works for everyone. I'll use this as an announcement of how I'm going to support my packages going forward, everything that I create for this channel. And I hope that you like this. It's I'm going to say a light comparison of the things. I think all of these solutions are very useful. If my Kubernetes instance was running in GCP, I would for sure host my containers in GCP Container Repository because they would sit beside my Kubernetes cluster. I would have a secure pipeline to my Kubernetes cluster. And not only that, I wouldn't even have to worry about my egress because I wouldn't egress from the Google network. So while not all of these worked for me for my requirements, that doesn't mean that they're bad solutions. Far from it. They all have their plus and minuses. And so anyways, I just wanted to let you in on a little of how I think about some of these things, how I approach them, and also give you a very light review of some of the container registries that are out there that you can possibly use for free. So if you like this style of video and would like to see some more, please leave me a comment and give me a thumbs up, and I will work at making some more of these because I do this on a daily basis and I'd love to share it with you. If you did not like this video, I'm going to have to ask you to go ahead and subscribe, stick around and see if these videos get any better for science.